welcome to Taskmaster Talks with Kevin Sullivan. I am your host, JP John Paz. And of course, with me is the star of the show, the former WCW and ECW World Tag Team Champion, one of the greatest minds and bookers ever in the history of the business, the man behind the 83 Weeks of Dominance, the Games Master, the Taskmaster, the devil himself, Mr. Kevin Sullivan. Kevin, how you doing today, sir?
Excellent, my friend. Excellent. So, spring is here. It's been great.
Yeah, I feel like it's getting to be nice out again. I love that. We get an hour more of sunlight, starting to get warmer. I love that.
Hey, JP, did we do away with daylight savings?
No, just was 2 weeks ago, actually.
Yeah, but I heard we are not going to go back.
Really? Oh, interesting.
I heard that. I don't know if that's true. That's why I asked.
Oh, no, I didn't hear that. I'm not sure. Interesting. I wouldn't mind it.
I wouldn't mind it either. We have extremes here. Like, when it's not daylight savings time, right? It will be dark till almost 8 o'clock. In the summer, where the sun comes up at 4:30, 4:35. It doesn't go down till I can be in my yard, but the sun sets on the other side of the island. So at 9:15, there's still light in the yard.
Oh, wow. That's awesome.
Yeah.
I like that. More sunlight, the better.
Yep.
Now, as far as what's going on in our world and in the Taskmaster world, we're talking all things WCW, a collision in Korea, which is a crazy event that they put on April 28th and April 29th, 1995. It aired, of course, August 4th, 1995 on pay-per-view in a condensed version of the two nights. They basically took 4 matches from night 1, 4 matches from night 2, and created the pay-per-view version and the pay-per-view, or the version that people can actually see and really experience. Interesting to note, it's not on WWE Network or anything. I don't know why, but it just never was, and it's not on Peacock. Just kind of interesting. I don't know if that's some sort of stance against them having a show politically in Korea. I don't know if you would think that too.
You think that would have went away when they went to Saudi?
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
But weird. No collision in Korea. So if you're able to get it, I ordered, of course, back in the day, ordered on pay-per-view. It was a condensed version of a pay-per-view, but you can get it online, YouTube or something. You just won't be able to see it on Peacock or the network. It was, of course, in Pyongyang, North Korea, at the Rungrado 1st of May Stadium. Interesting name there. The attendance total, 355,000. Day 1, 165. Day 2, 190,000 people. The tagline is 2 legends and 1 country. Are you buying the actual amount of people that were there? 190,000 on night 2.
Yes. I think they were forced to go. I don't think they actually paid. They knew the eyes of the world were on them. That has to be the record of all times, don't you think?
Yep. It 100% has to be. I mean, man, even the 165 is insane for night 1, and then you go back for night 2, and it's 190. I mean, whew. Whether you're forced to go there or not, I mean, just to have that amount of people and to see that, I mean, it's crazy. So definitely you think, obviously, the assumption would be that the crowd had to be there.
Yeah.
When you think of that, like I don't know, it's like, is that a really good thing that you're part of this dictatorship that makes people go places and do things? Is it okay to be aligned and be a part of that show, you think? Just thinking in generalities?
Well, I understand what they're trying to do, but I'm not big in, I understand it was for peace, which is a good thing, but what's the word I'm looking for? do we legitimize a dictatorship? What is the blowback on that for the rest of the world? Especially with South Korea being our ally and Japan being our ally. How do you think they took that?
Right.
So, but their biggest star went over there for a peace mission, meaning Inoki. And I told you before we got on that Inoki converted to being a Muslim after he fought Ali. They became very close. And Inoki always wears that red. And that's sort of like Tiger Woods. Remember when he used to wear the red?
Mm-hmm.
Tiger is not a Muslim, but that is a Asian color for power. Do you know what I mean? Self-power. So there was a lot of barriers they were trying to break down. I understand why Inoki came up with this. And it's funny that he took Ali there too, right?
Yep.
So I understand, but do we reward dictatorships? That's the only thing I question.
So obviously the retired boxing legend Muhammad Ali would be there, part of this quote-unquote peace mission as the event's guest of honor. So when Inoki is putting this thing together, is it just him kind of putting this together? Like, how do you guys get wrapped in, and who is really spearheading this thing?
Inoki was spearheading it. He got TBS to back him because of a relationship with New Japan. And I think, there was a lot of trepidation on the guys' parts going over there. They didn't know what they were going to get into. And I'm sure they were on pins and needles, don't you?
No doubt about it. Definitely.
Was Scott Norton on that trip?
Yes.
Did he get, where he couldn't go out of his hotel room, or is that?
Yeah, he was on the Dark Side of the Ring documentary. He got interviewed. I actually interviewed him not that long ago about it too, and he was saying because they were listening in on the phone calls, and he told his wife, "This place sucks. I hate this place. It's a dictatorship." Like he was just ripping it apart, and they were overhearing the phone call. So then all of a sudden, he basically wasn't allowed out or wasn't allowed anywhere because he was bad mouthing the country.
Wow. Wow. So,
now, do you know the connection to New Japan Pro Wrestling and North Korea anyway? Do you know the connection?
No, I don't.
So Rikidozan, who is actually North Korean, but they, for wrestling purposes, they pretended he was Japanese. His disciple is Antonio Inoki. That was his student. So Inoki had some ties to North Korea because of Rikidozan, and that's kind of, I guess, the genesis of the idea. Obviously, Rikidozan was murdered many, many years ago, but one of the biggest wrestling stars of all time, and some of the biggest gates of all time, and some of the biggest shows of all time, and TV ratings. If you want to go look up a legend, Rikidozan would be the guy, and kind of the god of Japanese wrestling, if you will. But he's kind of the basis of this peace mission.
Yeah, and you got to remember this. Rikidozan, I'm not sure if it was, I think it was Lutez. 89.9% of all the TVs in Japan watched that match. Think about that. And you got to remember, Ricky started that company, I believe, in 1952. The war was over in 45, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we're talking 7 years. The Japanese had been beat down from us dropping the atom bombs. And Ricky had the foresight of knowing the Japanese needed a hero. So that's why, I mean, back in those days, I may be off on the number, right? I was there when the yen meant more than the dollar by a couple of cents. Back in 52, I think it was 500 yen to a dollar, or a little more. I could be off on those figures, but not by much.
So,
and go ahead.
I was going to say, so Rikidozan, I mean, just huge, gigantic draw, really.
Huge. And I mean, the guys that went over there got huge paydays. I had heard a ridiculous number, and I'm not sure if this is right, but Fez wrestled Ricky 6 times the first tour he went over there. That's where they got the international heavyweight belt. Fez went over there as the international champion. He wrestled Ricky, I think, twice a week for 6 weeks. They paid him $300,000. Nobody else got that kind of money. But then they brought Blassie over, the Destroyer over, all the, anybody that meant anything in those years went to Japan. And Ricky ended up winning the WWA World Heavyweight title from Freddie Blassie. That's because the LA office was booked by Mr. Moto, who was Rikidozan's close friend. So, I mean, I think they had the return match in LA and another one in Hawaii. So it started the first really international territory that meant anything. This was before Australia.
Yeah, Japan, I mean, just huge. And really, the actually bigger draw than Feds versus Rikidozan was 12-2-63 JWA. Rikidozan versus the Destroyer, Dick Beyer, did even bigger numbers. Supposedly it's the biggest viewing audience ever for wrestling in history.
Really?
Yeah, so I mean that's huge, and it's funny because we're thinking like in the States we're thinking, okay, Hogan Andre did 33 million viewers on the main event on NBC, like that's huge. It's like, the Destroyer and Rikidozan did like 90 million, so pretty crazy.
Yeah, it showed you how over Rikidozan was, and the Destroyer.
Yeah,
yep. Destroyer ended up living there and had a TV show. The first time I went over there, he had a variety show. Tell you how smart Dick Myers was. He opened up the first pushcart hot dog stands in Tokyo.
Wow, interesting.
Yeah, very smart guy.
Man, yeah, I guess he lived there. I know he lived in Buffalo, New York, towards the end of his life, but I guess he lived there for most of his life.
Yeah, I think for at least 20 years.
So with this show, with Korea, you were not there, correct?
No, I was not there.
Was that a decision on your part or their part?
They could only take a limited number of guys, and I was hoping I wasn't going to go, telling you the truth. It would have been nice to say I was there, but I didn't need to go.
Did you want to go?
Not really. Because, my thought was something could happen,
Was that a real fear amongst everybody?
I think so. I mean, you're going into a place that has been shut down for years, right? Going against a country we were at war in, 20 years prior, or close to 20 years, or maybe a little bit more, right?
Yeah.
The Korean conflict.
Yep.
So, I mean, anything could happen, right?
It seemed like a lot of fear was like based around this. So it's supposed to be a peace mission, but it seemed like a lot of fear around these parts, especially WCW talent.
I'm sure there was. We talked about Norton. They overheard his phone calls, and they wouldn't let him out of his room, or he was, you know, I think guys were scared that they were afraid anything could happen.
When this is going on, obviously, New Japan's Tanaka, this guy Hideki Zu Tanaka, sorry if I pronounced that wrong, but he will be the ring announcer. The two referees are Tayama and, of course, the legendary Tiger Hattori. They would referee all matches, and really the presentation for the pay-per-view portion was done by Bischoff, Mike Tenay, and Kazu Ishikawa, a.k.a. Sonny Ono. So I feel like Ono and Bischoff obviously are playing a huge role in this. Is Bischoff, I mean, obviously he has to be for it, but is he really pushing for this, or is it somebody at Turner?
I'm sure it was Turner and Eric saw an opportunity to get onto a historical event, and rightfully so. Like you said, look at the numbers. And it was very interesting that nothing happened to me, you know, not to me personally, but to me, you know, anything could have happened, right? Didn't they have in Saudi Arabia a problem one time about the plane?
Oh yeah. So I guess Vince was complaining something about money or something that he didn't get paid for one of the shows. So he said, "Screw it, cut the feed." They snapped, you know, that he was cutting the feed. He got on the jet and he left. Him and like his big name guys, I guess, got on the plane and left, and they left a lot of the other guys there, and they wouldn't let the plane leave. So interesting. He played a little bit of game of chicken. I heard. The rumor is with the Crown Prince.
Right.
You never know, right? I mean, when you're in a foreign country with a dictator, you never know what's going to happen.
Yeah. I mean, on pins and needles.
So when Bischoff is gung-ho when he's doing this, one name is conspicuously absent. You would think that, okay, you have Muhammad Ali. We need the biggest pro wrestling name of all time. Where is Hulk Hogan at this point? I mean, he's in WCW, but does he just not want to go?
I can't speak for him, but I would imagine that was the reason why he didn't go. And it could have been a monetary reason, too.
When you look at that and Hogan's not a part of it, does that also kind of raise like a red flag? Well, if Hogan's not going, you know, I'm not interested either. You know, like that kind of thing?
I'm sure it did. But they brought Rick, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep. Flair would be the big name to replace Hulk.
Right. And now that you brought that up, it's funny because Hogan had worked for Inoki quite a bit.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess maybe he just didn't want to go to Korea.
I could definitely see not wanting to go, but it's just interesting to think like, okay, he was clearly like the first choice after they got Muhammad Ali. He was clearly the first choice, and he got turned down. Do you think that, I don't know, makes it a lesser show that Hulk wasn't on, or does that not even really matter because you get Flair instead?
I don't think the people over there knew. They were isolated. Do you think they knew who Hulk was? Do you even think they knew who Hogan was? You know what I mean? Everything was censored over there.
Yeah.
And I wonder how they took to pro wrestling. Well, I'll ask you. You saw the tape
Mm-hmm.
with people cheering or
And
booing or anything?
honestly, it almost comes off like the matches aren't as good, even though they are pretty good, because there's no real like reaction. It's like I don't know. I mean, I guess they've seen quote unquote wrestling before, that they've probably never seen pro wrestling, or maybe they're not used to it. But the crowd is way too quiet for me. Like you would expect certain reactions at certain points of matches, and you weren't getting that at all from that crowd. Kind of stinks.
Yeah.
Especially when you see a crowd that big, you're like, oh, I can't wait for this ovation, or I can't wait to see how the crowd reacts. And they just, not hands under their legs or anything, but it seemed like that kind of thing, where they weren't really cheering at all.
Well, my early years in Japan was very similar. The people were very polite. They would clap, but there wasn't any till later on. Big ovations for guys coming in, unless it was a Japanese guy. The Funks and Abdullah and the Sheik changed that.
Definitely. I also heard, like, reading stuff about this show, that New Japan Pro Wrestling might own the show, but that doesn't necessarily make sense because WCW was the one that had it on pay-per-view that was producing it. Do you know anything about New Japan maybe saying, oh, no, we own the rights and the footage to that show? Or is it like split ownership? Or maybe that's something you don't even know?
I really don't know, but I would think that New Japan allowed them to show it, but I'm sure New Japan got something out of it, whether it was monetary or just the prestige.
With something like this and something of this magnitude, okay, you don't have Hulk, but you have Flair, you have Inoki. Is this something like that you're heavily involved with because this is a big show? Like, are you booking the show, or do you have hands off?
I'm hands off completely.
Is there like a reason behind it? Is it just because it's an Inoki show, or is there more to it than that?
I think it was because it was an Inoki show. I think Eric and Inoki worked together to bring the guys over, and they probably got together on the finishes too. Because you got to remember, this was really in the infancy of our relationship with New Japan, and we were being paid big money at the time to have a relationship with them.
So also to note, New Japan and WWE did have a bit of a relationship during the Bill Watts era, but it is said that he really kind of, I don't know, didn't really do any favors, and he didn't do some good business with them, and Bischoff really had to work hard at getting their trust back. So I think this went a long way in helping that and helping nurture that relationship.
Oh, without question. Eric did a brilliant job. I actually went to Hawaii with Eric to broker the deal with New Japan.
What was your relationship, if any, with Antonio Inoki?
I met him on a few occasions, but I didn't work for them till later on, when he kind of stepped out of running New Japan. Even though he was the president, he was doing other things. Wasn't he involved then in another company that was like a shoot fighting company?
Mm-hmm. Yep. IGF.
Yeah. So I think at the time, he had stepped back when I was going over there at the, not at the tail end, but I think he had stepped out of the limelight and was really pushing for that. Did you say IGF?
Yep. Inoki Genome Federation.
Yeah. So, different time.
When you
But
look,
I met him on a couple of occasions when he came to the States, and you know, he came over a couple of times, but it was just to meet with Eric mostly.
what about when he wrestled a little bit for WWE? Remember, he had like a brief little feud, not feud, but say a mini feud with Regal. I think you might have been booking at that point.
Yeah. And Regal did a hell of a job for him.
Do you have to go over anything with him, like, you know, that he has to go over anything like that, or no?
We knew he was going over. Regal was smart enough to understand that he had to go over, and it was good business for Steve because he gave him a hell of a match.
When this show is put together and the guys leave, are you in contact with anybody, like as far as just like Bischoff or anybody when they leave or when they're over there?
No. You got to remember, you know, this is before cell phones, and I'm sure everything was shut down. You know, you couldn't just call North Korea. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So, and like you said, they were tapping the line, so there was no need for anybody from the States to call there, I don't believe, unless it was the Turner executives, because anybody could say something that could have been taken the wrong way.
As far as Dark Side of the Ring, I feel like they did do a good documentary. I know sometimes that show is not really that great, and sometimes it's like personal attacks or whatever kind of agenda that they're trying to do. I mean, no doubt about it, but I feel like some episodes are good, and they did do a good job on this one, focusing on Scott Norton and obviously Eric Bischoff and a little bit of Sonny Ono. So I feel like the Dark Side was good. Did you see that Dark Side of the Ring documentary on it?
No, I didn't.
They do a pretty good job, but it kind of shows you that these guys are stepping into a territory almost out of pure trust for Inoki, and for the fact that most of them have worked for New Japan before, so they're like, okay, we trust you, Inoki. We trust you, like, that we won't get killed or that it's safe. It's almost, I don't know, too much trust.
I think that they knew what the trip was for. It was a peace trip. And they knew that if something happened, I believe, but anything could happen. I think they trusted Inoki explicitly.
When everything is going on, like, as far as like they leave for the show, are you told anything of like how you're going to book the guys when they come back, stuff like that, or that's not even discussed?
Well, the guys are going to get booked the way they were scheduled to get booked. That was like completely out of the realm of the booking department. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
It was like it wasn't happening, even though we had a pay-per-view, but it was a completely different entity than WCW at the time.
So this show is going to happen. Do you know like the just like what they're going to put on pay-per-view, what they're not, or that you're not even concerned? That they're taping two nights and you don't even care about that.
I'm not concerned at all. It was like it wasn't happening.
Did you think it was a good idea, or do you think that this is just good for the relationship with New Japan and Inoki?
I think it was great relationships for Inoki. It showed Eric trusted them, and Eric, did a hell of a job on that thing. I mean, to calm a lot of people down to go, he did a great job. Eric sometimes doesn't get the credit he deserves for different things. He did.
I was listening to Scott Hall, like an old interview. He was saying that Russo and McMahon and the WWF got too much credit for the Attitude Era, and Bischoff wasn't getting enough credit for WCW and basically creating the Attitude Era.
Well, I think Scott was right. Scott was a very bright guy. And, yeah, I think sometimes as time goes by, people don't understand how Eric really changed the face of professional wrestling.
I think this is great that, like, I know it's a dictatorship and I know North Korea can be a little dangerous, but it's a peace mission. So, I mean, there could be a great positive spin on it. I feel like this is different. You know what I mean? I don't know how many other, now we see Vince with Saudi Arabia, but I don't know how many other promoters would have done. I mean, this is completely out of left field and completely different than we've seen from a wrestling show before.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Got to give it to him, you know. You're thinking outside the box.
Completely outside the box. Whoever would have thought that?
Yeah, nobody, right? I mean, just to think of that, it's a crazy idea.
Yeah. And I don't think we would have thought about it if it wasn't for Inoki.
When you are working with Inoki, and I know obviously, you know, you guys are doing this, but aside from that, when you go to New Japan, do you book as far as like the guys winning and losing and who's wrestling, or that it's all him?
That's all Inoki and Eric.
What about when you have the guys? Do they dictate to you who's winning and losing?
Oh, I had an idea what I should do. And Eric did too. I mean, you know, we're getting a lot of money and we're not paying their guys to come over, and yet our guys are getting paid to go over there. It was a sweet deal for us, and I think we got the better of the deal. So we're not going to, you know, when a Japanese guy comes over, I got to be very careful what I'm doing with him.
You don't want to lose or bury them or get upset, yeah.
Yeah.
You don't want to upset about Inoki or anything.
I don't want to upset the deal that we got with them. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So when Hulk says no, what is that, like? What happens? What's the process? They immediately just go for Flair, and hopefully he says yes.
Oh, Rick was going to go. He, you know, Rick was he was at this time to me still the flag bearer of WCW.
How do you think he felt as far as like maybe being asked second? Do you think that there was anything to that? Was he upset at all?
I don't think no, not at all. I think Inoki wanted Flair rather than Hogan.
Really? Why is that?
Less Rick could really, you know, work Inoki's style. You know what I mean?
For sure.
Rather than go to Hogan.
When Flair does get asked, is there any like sort of like pullback or anything about him going over? Or
no, he wanted to go.
Wow, I'm surprised that he was so gung ho about it.
Well, they knew they were going to have a lot of people there. Rick loves the big game. He's a big game player.
Do you ever talk to him about like, hey, you scared going over there, or do you ever talk to him about like that kind of stuff?
Yeah, and he didn't. He made jokes of it, but he felt that they were all going to be okay, especially with Inoki and Ali there. You got to remember that Ali went, and what were they going to do? Cause an international incident with Ali?
Right, that would have been disastrous.
Yeah,
Pretty crazy that Inoki not only talked Flair into it, but I mean that he was able to talk Muhammad Ali into it. Think about it, it's pretty crazy.
yeah. That shows how the friendship developed after the fight they had. The Inoki Ali fight.
Yep. There's a
Yeah,
great book by Josh Gross, Inoki versus Ali. It's funny. It's like the build up to it was so much better than the actual fight itself. You know.
yeah, yeah.
What did you
I
think?
think
What did you think of that fight?
what? Well, I was on the Shea Stadium card with Andre and Webner. That turned into be a shoot. Because he was rabbit punching. If you watch it, he's rabbit punching the Andre in the back of the head, right?
Yep.
And then when he gets thrown out of the ring, you can see that Monsoon comes in and he's really hot, right? Gets involved in it. So it's I think what happened was they were going to work, and Ali looked at Inoki because Inoki had been very sick prior to that. Do you remember that?
No.
He had been very sick. He was very, very thin and very lean. And I think Ali said, I can knock this guy out. And it was very boring. You know what I'm saying?
Yep. The thing was that he doesn't get off the ground really because he doesn't want to get knocked out by Ali, but Ali can't go down to get him. So Inoki just keeps kicking his leg and kicking his leg and kicking his leg, creating like a big bruise, but not really nailing anything that's going to hurt him that day. In the long run, it may have hurt him, but not that day.
Right. He got hematomas all over his legs.
Mm-hmm.
And like you said, that was a good point you brought up. Maybe in the long range, it bothered Ali.
So if you think about it, that fight happened June of '76. It's pretty boring. The build-up is way better than the actual fight. But his next fight after that is against Ken Norton in September, and you think, okay, he's definitely going to win. He does win, but it's way closer than the unanimous decision says. And it seemed like his legs weren't quite there, which definitely could be the case from Inoki really damaging his leg.
Right. I think that's had long-lasting effects on Ali.
Because he had problems not beating Ernie Shavers. He beats him, but he couldn't finish him. It didn't seem like his leg. And then he had a split. He loses to Spinks and he beats Spinks. It's kind of not the unraveling. I know he's headed towards the end of his run, but what Inoki did to his leg, people laugh like, "Oh, he's just a pro wrestler." He's a legit shoe fighter, legit tough. MMA kind of comes from that fight and comes from him, a lot of it. So to me, it's like I think he did a lot more damage than even maybe Ali realized at that time. Ali and Inoki, I do think that fight did have some lasting effects that people just never talk about, but it definitely did because that leg injury, then he flew all the way back home when they kind of didn't tell him to fly all the way back home that early, but he said, hey, I got a fight to train for. I got Ken Norton coming up.
Okay. Go back to the record books, okay? After Inoki, right?
Mm-hmm.
He had fought Ron Lyle and lost to him he fought Kenny Norton, lost to him, a split decision. The fight you're talking about, he wins on a split decision.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And then, then he fought Ken Norton. Okay. Now, listen to what I'm going to read. After that, okay. Norton, he does a knockout. Norton, the second fight, he does a knockout. He fought Rudy Lubitz in Hong Kong, knocked him out. No, won in a unanimous decision. Joe Frazier, unanimous decision.
Those are all before the Inoki fight, though, aren't they? Yeah, those are all pre-Inoki fight.
Oh, they are?
Yeah. So Inoki's fight is June of 76.
Okay, that's the third fight. 76, it's actually September.
Yeah.
Yankee Stadium.
Yep. And everyone thought, Norton's going to get knocked out, and he wins, but it was pretty close.
Okay. Yeah, it was. But okay, from there he got a decision, right? His next fight, Alfredo Estevez, he gets a decision. Ernie Shavers, he gets a decision. Leon Spinks, he loses. Leon Spinks, he wins on the decision. Larry Holmes, he gets beat. Trevor Berbick, he gets beat. So he never got another knockout after the Norton fight. And he lost 3 after the Norton fight. He lost 3 out of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. He lost 3 out of the next 6 fights.
Yeah. Big decline.
Yeah, and never got another knockout. So I think it did last him. It did hurt him.
I always think about that. It's like people forget, because maybe that's not in his record, obviously not in his official record, because it's like an exhibition MMA rules kind of fight. But people forget, oh yeah, that's right, he did fight Inoki, an actual shoot. Maybe it was supposed to be work, but it was an actual shoot.
Right.
Interesting, with those boxer versus wrestler, usually the wrestler wins. Like when Randy Couture fought James Tunney, Couture killed him. Took him down, tapped him out easy. But then, of course, there's the wrestling ones like Chuck Wepner. Sometimes there definitely works, but the shoot ones, it seems like the wrestler beats the boxer more times than not because he takes him down, and then the boxer is done.
Right.
Are you big?
Buddy Rogers beat Jersey Joe Walcott in a fight, boxing versus wrestler way back when. But, that was one of the few works that the wrestler went over.
Mm-hmm.
Mike DiBiase lost. I forget who he lost to, but it was a contender. And Cowboy Luttrell against Jack Dempsey after he had been retired. You know what I mean?
Yep.
He really pummeled Cowboy. And then Roy Shires lost, I believe, to Jersey Joe Walcott in a work.
Are you a fan of wrestler versus boxer? Just as a draw?
No, because usually, that's what evolved into MMA, right?
Oh, yeah.
If you work in it, it's very hard to work. Do you know what I mean? Guy got gloves on, you're limited to the excitement. But now we have MMA, we get to see it.
Definitely. So with this show, the actual show, there's actually about 15 matches. if you count night 1 and night 2, but we'll just talk about the pay-per-view version, the one that actually aired, which was kind of like the highlights or the best of when they put all the good matches together. So the first match would be Wild Pegasus, a.k.a. Chris Benoit, defeating Too Cold Scorpio in about 6 minutes. This was a really good match, I thought. Despite the crowd really not being into it, I thought this was a hell of a match, and you can't really, on like a normal card, if you go back to like Super Bowl '93 when these two started off and had a great match, you just think like, wow, who could you start off the show with if you're going to put this out there for, the American audience or whatever, the Japanese audience, anybody but the North Korean audience, because maybe they didn't understand what was going on. But I would think Benoit and Scorpio would be at the top of your list of wanting to book guys at top of a card.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure Eric and Inoki got together on this and said we got to start with some really good stuff. Bravo to them.
Benoit and Scorpio, two of the best. Hell, Scorpio's still wrestling, and he's still in pretty good shape.
Yeah, he's in very good shape.
Are you a Scorpio fan?
Big time. Big time.
He's one of those guys where, man, I just can't believe he didn't kind of get pushed further. You know what I mean? Like when he was in WWF, I know he had a little bit of a weight issue, but he was still in great shape as far as being able to do what he could do and the moves that he could do. I know Flash Funk 2 was a bad gimmick, but it seemed like, he was destined for more. And I know he had a big career in Japan, but it feels like he was destined for more here in the States.
I did too. And I can't tell you why he didn't. Sometimes guys are just overlooked. And he was definitely overlooked in my book.
And of course, we know all about Wild Pegasus, aka the Pegasus Kid, aka Chris Benoit. We've talked about him a lot on the show, but that great opener, I thought great match, good way to start the show, despite the crowd being what it was. Then we got Yuji Nagata defeating Ichikawa in the second match. The third match, Masahiro Chono and Mr. Saito. Hiro Saito defeat El Samurai and Yasuda. I know you're very familiar with Mr. Saito, right?
Yeah, very familiar with him. And Chono, too.
When this relationship is going on here, I have to mention this because it's April 28th, 29th for these two huge shows in 95. The pay-per-view airs August 4th, 1995, but in December of 95, it's Starrcade, New Japan versus WCW. To me, this was kind of the beginning of what would then become the big relationship with New Japan Pro Wrestling, because you guys, had the World Cup of Wrestling, did the pay-per-view together. So had you guys not have done Collision in Korea, I don't know if the World Cup of Wrestling and the great Starrcade 95 pay-per-view would have happened, right?
Well, that's a great question. I don't know if it would have either. They pulled it off. They did what Inoki wanted, and it cemented the relationship. Again, kudos to Eric and the guys that went there and worked.
The next matchup, fourth match, evening, Bull Nakano and Akira Hokuto defeated Mayami Toyota and Mariko Yoshida. Of course, Mayami Toyota, everyone says, is like the greatest women's wrestler ever. But here, Bull Nakano and Akira Hokuto, girls you're very familiar with, they get the big win here at the show.
Yeah, I mean, Bull was a spectacle, right? I mean, I think the reason why they put her over, maybe because of her size. I'm not sure, but I'm just surmising that.
And Akira Hokuto, former WCW Women's Champion, so you know her well. Mayami Toyota is known as one of the all-time greats. I know several people love talking about how she's one of the greatest workers ever. A lot of fans probably aren't that familiar with her. She was very good, but didn't make a name for herself in the States, which probably hurts her legacy in the long run.
Yeah, but she worked for a lot of companies in Japan also, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah. So, yeah.
So we get the IWGP Heavyweight Championship match up next. Shinya Hashimoto fought Scott Norton to a 20-minute time limit draw, keeping Norton strong there. Obviously, one of Inoki's boys, one of the top gaijins in Japan, keeping him strong. But it's pretty cool that Hashimoto's over there, one of the most popular Japanese wrestlers of all time. But they're having the IWGP, which is the New Japan Heavyweight title, having that defended in North Korea. I mean, that's pretty cool.
Very cool. Because you got to realize how many times Japan and Korea went to war. And, you know, what happened in World War II between the Koreans and the Japanese.
Scott Norton, along with Vader and AJ Styles, are the only gaijins to have multiple reigns with the IWGP title. So it just shows you how much they like Scott Norton, that he wasn't even going to lose on this show. You know what I mean? They made it a time limit draw. It seemed like that was definitely kind of on purpose. You know, like they were keeping their guy strong.
Without question, it was done because of Scott's drawing ability in Japan.
So at this point, obviously in WCW, Hogan is the heavyweight champion, and he's not over there. So obviously, it would have been pretty cool if somehow he was able to go over there or wanted to go over there and have the WCW title defended over there too. They felt like it was important for the IWGP title to be defended. I think it would have been pretty cool if somehow, some way, the WCW title could have been defended over there as well.
I also think it's you and me being fans. I don't think they knew who was the world heavyweight champion for WCW.
That is true. Yeah, that is true. It would have been more for the fans and for me basically to hey, WCW title is really the world title because it was defended in North Korea of all places.
Yeah, but you know they weren't getting newspapers at the time. I'm sure the signals, they weren't getting too much TV if they had even TVs. I'm sure the rich had some TVs, but it's a very small number of rich people in North Korea. So I think they were going into this blind, not knowing who was who, except Inoki, Ali.
Yep, definitely. The next matchup, Road Warrior Hawk defeated Yasuda. Yasuda actually had two matches here. He had the tag match earlier, which was a part of night one, and this match here was a part of night two. When you're watching, you're like, wow, this guy wrestled twice in a night, but he really didn't. It was back-to-back nights. But Road Warrior Hawk gets the win here. Obviously, another huge name to kind of throw on the card, but Road Warrior Hawk on the show, pretty cool.
Right, and he's also, you know, the Road Warriors were big in Japan. It wasn't this time when the Hawk got a Japanese partner in Japan.
Yes, Kensuke Sasaki, the Power Warrior.
Yeah.
Pretty cool get up too. He's not on this show, but when they did do that team up there, the Hellraisers, he had the awesome green shoulder pads.
Yeah.
So the next matchup, the Steiner brothers. Speaking about over in Japan, the Steiner brothers, Rick and Scott, defeated Hiroshi Hase. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't even realize this. And I can't believe I just didn't even think about it. Kensuke Sasaki is on this card. So the Steiner brothers defeat Hiroshi Hase and Kensuke Sasaki. Kensuke was the former Power Warrior. I can't believe I just didn't realize that he was on the show. But yeah, he is.
And the Steiners drew big money for Inoki, so I'm sure, you know, they got all kinds of press in Japan.
Yeah.
And they took care of their guys.
Brain fart there, because this would be one of the matches, if you're going to go back and watch this and the opener, this was great. Hase and Sasaki against the Steiner brothers. Steiners get the win, but I thought this was a great match. And they've had matches before in New Japan, so very familiar with each other.
Right.
So it's pretty good, though. Just, I know Hogan's not on it, but just name value wise, Road Warrior Hawk, the Steiner brothers, Flair. You know what I mean? There is Scott Norton and Scorpio and Benoit to an extent, but really Hawk, Flair, and the Steiners get some pretty good star power from the States.
Right. Right. And, you know, they all translated back to Japan, too.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. So the main event of the evening, Antonio Inoki defeats Ric Flair in about 15 minutes. Pretty good match. I wouldn't say great or match of the night or anything, but maybe the third best match of the night. It was pretty good, but Inoki, of course, gets the win there. There would be no doubt about that.
Right. He's the guy that put it on, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah.
It's his show. He's got to win. But hypothetically speaking, if Hogan was there, you think that he's jobbing to Inoki? He would have to, right?
Yeah, that's why Rick is over there, I'm sure.
Do you think Hogan would have had no problem doing it?
Probably not, but he didn't want to probably go to Korea.
Right. Definitely. It's one of those things that you could say you did it. You know, like, I went there. Flair, like, yeah, main evented the biggest show in history of wrestling, 190,000 people, right? I mean, it is a good stake to claim.
Yes, it is. It is.
Have you ever seen any version of the show or any highlights or anything of the show?
I saw some highlights originally, yeah. But again, did people pay?
Probably not.
Yeah. Were they made to go?
Probably. Mm-hmm. So overall,
you know, it's like, go ahead.
I was gonna say just overall, like it's a pretty good show just because you got three good matches, but it's weird. Like, you know what I mean? Like, the people forced to go there, they really pay. Like, did they even want to be there? Do they even know what they're watching? It's weird.
I think it's the big thing is they didn't know what they were watching.
If
you never saw pro wrestling, what would you think the first time and you've been isolated and never really saw TV?
Yeah. Yep. We'd think, like, what the hell is this? What the hell's going on?
Yeah.
When you look back at it, like, what's just your overall thoughts on just on the show?
I think it was great business Eric did for New Japan and cementing our relationship.
As far as the actual show itself, you think it doesn't really matter?
Well, it matters in history because of the houses, but it didn't affect us. I wonder what the buy rate was. Do you know?
That I didn't see. I want to see if I can figure that out. I don't know because it was like almost like a highlight show, and it wasn't like a traditional pay-per-view. It was, it was recorded earlier and not live, so I'm not sure. Let me see. See if I could find if they even have it listed. Because I tried to check this one site that I normally go to, and I didn't see it. Okay, they're saying here that it did 30,000 buys is what I'm reading. That's it.
Yeah.
But it was shorter than the traditional pay-per-view. It was in August when you guys had Clash of the Champions that year, and it really wasn't promoted as like it wasn't live, but it wasn't really promoted as like this big deal, like as far as pay-per-views.
Yeah.
It's one of those like kind of maybe a good concept or a good thought, but it's just the execution of it and like the thought behind it. It's like, I don't know how great it's going to do. Like, let's just throw it a highlight package on a shorter pay-per-view and see how it does. Like, it did 30,000 buys, so not that great, really.
And you probably couldn't put it on satellite to do it live.
Nope, definitely not.
Yeah.
Yeah, what a kind of interesting show, thought, and when you go back and you look at it, it's almost like, that didn't really happen, did it? You know what I mean? Like one of those things like, oh my God, they had a wrestling show in North Korea? Like, I don't know, just think about it. It makes me think, wow, that's crazy.
Yeah. But it was good business for us.
Got to make Antonio Inoki happy. Obviously, that helped because Starrcade that year, Starrcade 95, you guys do the big World Cup of Wrestling, New Japan Pro Wrestling versus WCW. So it really did help the relationship.
Yes, it did.
Let's head towards the plugs. Follow me on Twitter and Instagram at 2Man Power Trip. Check out the website tmptempire.com. You can follow Kevin on Instagram at Taskmaster Talks. Also, go to Pro Wrestling Tees, ProWrestlingTees.com, and visit the Kevin Sullivan store. Kevin, you got anything else going on?
Yeah, I'll be in Buffalo Saturday, so my friends come out and see me. And if you get a chance, pick up the book Old School on Amazon. You'll be amazed at it. And that's about it, John. Until next week.
Great stuff as always. Thank you, Kevin, and thank you everybody out there for listening. We'll see you right back here next week.